Hi everyone, how are you all doing and welcome back. So you're new to Battlefield 5 and you see the Recon class and you're not really too sure what its role is on the battlefield, how best to go about using it and sort of what's it about. So hopefully with this video we'll be able to bring you up to speed on how best to use it effectively and get the most out of it for yourself. So the Recon class is sort of the long range class of the game. Its weapons are primarily used for sort of extreme to long range engagements. There are some weapons within there that allow you to get sort of close to medium range and sort of be more sort of in the thick of it on the front lines, and we'll get into that later on. It's also meant to sort of add sort of a support role, not as a support class, but support your teammates by giving them sort of an overview of the battlefield through sort of flares, beacons, that kind of thing. So sort of allow your teammates and squad mates to sort of spawn closer to the objectives and give them sort of critical information on enemy movements and vehicle movements as well. Since we're talking about sort of roles of the Recon class, let's jump into the basic role section. So the first one is to harass the enemy. So with the sort of gadgets and perks that you have available at your disposal, you can harass the enemy by tagging them, marking them for your teammates, picking them off at a distance, and sort of become a nuisance on the battlefield, since you're always constantly updating your team on where the enemy are, where they're moving, sort of with your spot and scope, flares and etc. More on that later. You can really sort of get into the enemy's heads, since they can't really flank around, get behind your team, since you're always giving away their position. So it's really useful for that role. Mentioning flares and spot and scope, sort of giving an overlay of the battlefield. Like I mentioned, with the use of flares and spot and scopes, you can really sort of give your team an idea on enemy movements, whether it be players or vehicles. Just by spotting them, your team can get some critical information and hopefully stop the flanking maneuvers and enemies that may be behind the team. You can make sure that it doesn't sort of get out of control and you start losing flags and stuff that are behind, or objectives that are behind you guys, or get wiped out. And finally, support the squad. I mentioned spawn beacons earlier on, and we'll go into a lot more detail later on. But you can support your squad by putting the spawn beacons down close to the objective and allowing your squad members and also other recon members that have the correct perk to spawn in that beacon and make sure somebody's always on guard, or behind enemies. There's always people behind the enemy sort of harassing them as well. So it's a really sort of useful role for both team and sort of solo play as well in that sense. So like every other class on Battlefield 5, the Recon has two perks. The Sniper is used for sort of that long to extreme range gameplay due to the benefits that it has with it. So you can spot enemies when you shoot them. So when you tag an enemy like in the chest, the leg, and you don't end up killing them, it marks them on your map and puts a symbol of their class role above their head, so for both you and your teammates. So you can really highlight more troop movement on the battlefield. With this as well, you can hold your breath longer, so it allows you to sort of stay scoped in and line up those sort of long range shots with a bit more time on your hands. You can also replenish that time, so you hold allowing you to hold your breath even longer with headshot kills. So you can get a few back-to-back headshots and replenish that time, which is really useful. And the second perk is the Pathfinder one. So with this, I use it more for when I'm on sort of the objective, on the front line, sort of playing that aggressive recon. As you can spawn on other teammates' beacons. So if a teammate puts a beacon down behind the enemies, if you could spawn on it and get your squad members spawning on you. And in addition to that, you get extra sort of requisition. So when teammates or squad mates spawn on your spawn beacon, you can get some points more points from that, which can then add up to you getting your V1, your smoke barrage, artillery, spawning in vehicles and stuff like that. So it's really useful in that sense. Also, just quickly, with regards to spawning on teammates' beacons, you can only do that as a recon with a Pathfinder perk. So unfortunately for you sort of medics, assault supports, you can't spawn on teammates' beacons, but you can spawn on squad mates' beacons. So with that all wrapped up, let's jump onto the weapons now and get to sort of dive into the best ones to use and to suit your playstyle. So just quickly, these are the sort of rifle carbine variants that you can get within the Recon class. Just going to fill you guys in quickly with them and sort of give you a rundown of sort of what each one does, benefits, negatives to using them, and so on and so forth. So we've got the bolt action rifle here. This is sort of your single shot rifle. Most of the time it's sort of 5 bullets within the sort of chamber, and it fires one at a time, and you have to sort of cut bolt back to sort of load the next shot in. Quite standard in many FPS games. Sort of slow rate of fire, but they do pack a punch. Normally sort of a one-shot kill to the upper body and head region. There are sort of specializations that you can use to make the rate of fire quicker. Obviously, it wouldn't be on par with an SMG or anything like that. It's like normally like a few, like sort of few tens, of increase in speed. But it is beneficial if you do play that sort of aggressive sort of frontline recon. I prefer using that sort of bolt action rifle. So this is the self-loading rifles. These are semi-auto rifles. Sort of same magazine size, I guess, as the bolt action rifle, but they pack less of a punch. But obviously, there's no bolt that you have to cut back. So if you really sort of want to be on the front lines, up close, normally a two-shot kill. Unless the enemy is damaged and you sort of get an upper body headshot, then it is a one-shot kill. The best one that I recommend for this section is the ZH-29. It is pretty much broken at this stage. You may get some flack for using it because people don't really like people that use this gun, but it is the sort of the best semi sort of auto sniper in the game at the moment. So this is the anti-material rifle, pretty much like the Barrett 50 cal in modern times. Does quite a lot of damage against vehicles and sort of tanks. It's more that kind of area it does excel in. Obviously does a lot of damage to enemies, like I said, probably one shot kill to sort of the chest to head region. And yeah, it is quite a unique rifle, this is, in the sense that a bit like the MMGs as a support class. Only way to aim in is to sort of either go prone or kind of get some cover to where your bipod can be deployed. You can still hit fire with it, but if you get lucky, then fair play, but it is quite a risk. So I do recommend sort of running sort of a high rate of fire pistol or a high damage sort of Model 27 or Magnum, just to help kind of give yourself a bit of cover if you do get caught out or have to move after sort of firing a few shots in an area. But going back to the vehicles, you can sort of do quite a bit of damage to especially light vehicles. Obviously Tiger tank, it's a bit less, but you can hit weak spots on vehicles, tanks, to sort of get a kill and sort of annoy the vehicles, make them a bit wary of you. If you're always sort of chipping away at their health here or there, you can get them kind of getting a bit annoyed and kind of deny area of the maps for them, and you can sort of help out with the assault class. So that's kind of their main role, they sort of excel in. So the pistol carbons, these are really used for, like I've already mentioned, real close range, up there with sort of the, I guess, on the front lines with the SMGs. I mean, you would lose out to, like, I guess, a Type 2A or the Suomi, but you can sort of hold your own if you really want to play that aggressive style sort of recon build. There are obviously two types. We've got the PO8, single shot fire, and the trench carbine, and the kind of quirk with the trench carbine is there is a sort of fully automatic mode on it, whereas the PO8 carbine is single shot. So depending on kind of what you like playing, obviously with the PO8 you can have a good trigger finger and sort of spam the shots out, but I do enjoy sort of the trench carbine. As you can see, I've got a bit of gold on it, and it's level 10, whereas the PO8 is level 5. So that's kind of my recommendation for that one, is the trench carbine. So finally, we've got the final sort of rifle section, is the semi-auto rifle section. It got added into the game with the final update a few months back. There's only one weapon in it, but it is quite a unique rifle in the sense that it has a suppressor on it. One of the only guns in the game, sort of snipers in the game with a suppressor. And it also comes with a sort of infrared sight. So, on those darker maps it can be really kind of useful. There's the brighter maps where you might be in the sun quite a bit. It is sometimes hard to see enemies at a distance, but at that point you wouldn't really be engaging them, as it doesn't pack as much of a punch at longer ranges compared to, say, the bolt action or the self-loading rifle. But up close, medium to close range, it is really useful, especially with the suppressor. You can leave enemies guessing where you are, and if you can get behind the enemy lines, you can pretty much stay quite invisible with it. Especially if you can just sort of pump a couple of shots into them and keep moving. It's just a fun rifle to use. If you haven't got around to using it yet, or want to try something new, I do recommend using it. It's just a good fun gun to sort of play around with for a bit if you want to mix things up. That's for the sort of rifles done with, and we'll get onto the next section now. The Recon class has some very unique gadgets. all in which can sort of help your team capture objectives and also deceive the enemy as well. So let's jump into it. So your gadget slot 1 is made up of really your spotting equipment. So the spotting scope is sort of a telescope-like gadget that allows you to sort of mark enemies at a distance, whether it be tanks, cars, players, planes, and it's sort of a single focused gadget in the sense that like you have to look down the scope and then you can mark enemies sort of one by one and sort of point them at your team at a longer distance. Moving on, the Doppelsus is sort of a double barrel flare gun, and it fires a light into the sky or a projectile, and it has a big AoE effect. So as you fire it, it's quite a big circle, and as it gets closer to the ground and touches the ground, it becomes a real small sort of circle. So real good for sort of narrow spaces, sort of like your Operation Locker, or there's those real small and sort of compact maps, even like Rotterdam or such. And then finally, the flare gun, once again fires a projectile in the sky. However, this time it has a little parachute on it, so you can stay up in the sky, and it has a big area of effect. However, the downside to this is it can be shot down easily, and lately players are becoming more and more aware of it, as it's not that hard to miss unless it's sort of in line of sight with the sun, as the sun can kind of block it out. Otherwise, they do end up shooting it down. So all three of these can be used interchangeably with different play styles. However, if you're playing that extreme role, sort of extreme engagement role as a sniper, the spotting scope's probably best. And then like sort of your Doppelsus and flare gun are used for more that sort of close quarters, medium to sort of short range sniping. Due to that sort of the nature of their sort of use, as you can't like fire it across the map, whereas like the spotting scope, you can aim in and pick enemies across the map and whatnot. So depending on your style, you may want to play around with it and sort of kind of find what suits you best. But for me personally, spotting scope for extreme to sort of long range engagements, and then Doppelsus and the flare gun, so for that sort of close to medium range engagement. Moving on to gadget slot 2, you have the AP mine, which is like a bouncing Betty. Best to hide it behind doors or in like a bit of vegetation, outside, and pick enemies off guard. Used primarily, you can put it on objectives and stuff like that, and you can also use it if you're sort of in a stationary position to sort of cover your back and give yourself that extra bit of protection. Do be aware though, you can lie down underneath them, so when they go off, if you immediately lie down and go prone, you can receive sort of less damage from it. Then you got the sniper decoy, so it's sort of like an upper body of a character on stilts, sort of like, it looks a bit like paper mache. And what you can do with it, so if an enemy shoots it, so you put it down sort of behind cover, so like the bottom half of it's sort of say behind a sandbag, so only the top is showing. And if an enemy shoots it, it reveals their location. So it is best to hide it in cover, like I mentioned, because it is like the sort of lower half of it isn't still a person. It looks like it's like wood. It's basically wood. It's like on wooden stilts. So it's best to hide it in cover and let the enemy shoot it. Next up, you got the spawn beacon, which I mentioned earlier on. Static spawn point allows your squad as well as snipers with the Pathfinder perk to spawn on it. So it's quite self-explanatory. This is the one I primarily use, as I like to be on the objective and close up to the enemy. So allowing my squad to spawn on it can be useful as well. And finally, we've got the RMN 50 frag rifle. So it's like an anti-infantry rifle with a timer-based explosive on it, so you can explode it in midair. If there's an enemy behind like a wall, you can sort of get the fuse right and like, kind of get it over the wall so it explodes sort of right on top of them. I haven't used it much personally. It is a good fun, but I would take like a spawn beacon or an AP mine over it, but more sort of spawn beacon on sort of for me personally. But like I mentioned, play around with them all. You haven't got really anything to lose, and kind of find out what works best for you. All can be used for different play styles and kind of how you feel like playing on the day. And finally, we're going to sort of the grenades now. Sort of two, you got the standard sort of frag grenades and firecrackers and everything else that every other class has. But these are sort of the two sort of, I guess, unique to the Recon class in that sense. So you got the throwing knife, so you sort of use that close range, one shot kill, sort of stealth if you want to play it stealthy. They are good fun. I primarily use the smoke grenades. I know they aren't like the medic and stuff like that, but I do use the smoke grenades just to provide that extra bit of cover when moving between sort of objectives to objectives. As like I mentioned, I prefer that sort of close, medium range sort of play style more than the extreme range. But the throwing knives are good fun to use. But like I said, play around with it, see what works for you. But the throwing knives are just a good time if you want to, just have a bit of fun on the battlefield. But yeah, that sort of wraps up the video for today. I hoped it was useful. Let me know below if you want to see anything else. I've got an assault guide coming up next. But if you want to see any improvements or anything like that, please let me know. Drop a like and a comment below. And yeah, guys, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll catch you in a bit. Have a good one.